God tells Noah to build an ark. Noah builds it. The flood comes. Everyone else drowns. You've heard that 100 times. Here's what you haven't asked. Did Noah build a 450-foot boat in secret? No. This took decades. Neighbors watched it rise. Kids grew up walking past a massive ship, nowhere near an ocean. So the real question isn't whether Noah knew. God told him directly. The question is, who else knew? Who else heard the warning and did nothing? That question changes the whole story. This isn't about one righteous man. It's about a world that had every chance to listen and didn't. Let's find out who they were. We tell this story wrong. We treat Noah like the only person on earth who saw it coming, like God whispered a secret to one guy, and everyone else just got unlucky. That's not what the evidence shows. Noah had a father who named him with a prophecy, a great-grandfather whose death lines up with the flood almost to the year. And outside the Bible entirely, flood stories show up from Mesopotamia to South America, like humanity remembers being warned. 7 clues, all pointing the same direction. Noah wasn't shouting into a void. He may have been the only one who listened. He wasn't the only one who heard. Let's begin with the man closest to Noah, his father, Lamech. Genesis 5 verse 29. Lamech names his newborn son Noah and says this child will bring relief from the painful, cursed labor of the ground. That's not small talk at a birth. That's a man expecting something big. Trace the line back. Lamech's father was Methuselah. Methuselah's father was Enoch, the man who walked with God and was taken instead of dying. Genesis 5 verse 24. 3 straight generations locked into an unusual closeness with God. Then Lamech names his son like he's anticipating judgment and relief in the same breath. Noah wasn't picked at random. He was raised for this. This one sounds eerie. Methuselah lived 969 years, longest recorded life in the Bible. Run the genealogies in Genesis 5 and 7, and his death lines up almost exactly with the year the flood hits. Some rabbinic commentators even tie his name to a phrase like, when he dies, it will be sent, a reference to judgment. To be fair, that's tradition, not text. Scholars notice the pattern centuries later. It's not stated outright in Scripture, but the math alone is hard to shrug off. The oldest man in the Bible dies right as the water comes, like his life was the countdown clock. If that's true, an entire world watched its most respected elder die, and the flood hit the same year. If there was ever a moment to take Noah seriously, that was it. Back one more generation, Methuselah's father, Enoch. Genesis 5 verse 24 says Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more, because God took him away. No death, just gone. Outside the Bible, the book of Enoch, not canon, but well known to ancient readers, expands on this, describing Enoch getting visions of coming judgment. And here's the part that ties straight back to Scripture. Jude quotes Enoch by name, citing a prophecy about God coming to judge the world. Jude 1 verses 14 to 15. So whatever didn't make the biblical canon, the idea of Enoch as a prophet warning about judgment was already circulating among Jewish and early Christian readers. By the time Noah picked up a hammer, judgment is coming wasn't new information in his family. It was generations old. Genesis 6 verse 3, God sets the clock. My spirit will not contend with humans forever. Their days will be 120 years. Most scholars read that as a 120-year grace period before the flood. Not a surprise attack. A public countdown. And Noah wasn't quiet during it. 2 Peter 2 verse 5 calls him a preacher of righteousness. Not a guy who built a boat and hoped for the best. A preacher. Speaking, in public, possibly for over a century. Picture it. Over 100 years watching a ship rise plank by plank, while the man building it tells you exactly why. They didn't miss the warning. They ignored it. Right before the flood, Genesis 6 drops one of the strangest lines in the Bible. The sons of God and human women and the earth filling with corruption and violence. Genesis 6 verses 1 to 5. Scholars debate who the sons of God were. What matters? God says in verse 5 that every inclination of the thoughts of their heart was only evil all the time. A society doesn't get that broken without people noticing. This wasn't a peaceful world blindsided by a random disaster. It was a civilization that had already crossed lines it knew it shouldn't, meaning the warning signs were everywhere long before Noah swung a hammer. Here's the detail that flips the story. Matthew 24 verses 38 to 39. Jesus describes the people before the flood, eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. Notice what Jesus doesn't say. He doesn't say they had no information. He says they were too distracted by ordinary life to take it seriously. Eating, drinking, weddings, while a warning the size of a ship sat in their front yard. That's the real tragedy. Not that God kept people in the dark, that people had every reason to pay attention and chose routine instead. Jesus later uses this exact comparison to warn his own listeners not to repeat it. Last piece. It goes global. Noah's flood isn't the only one on record. The Epic of Gilgamesh describes a great flood and a man who builds a boat to survive it. China, Greece, indigenous nations across the Americas all carry versions of a catastrophic flood survived by a small group. Historians disagree on why. Some see shared memories of a real event. Others see coincidence, given how common flooding disasters were in the ancient world. Either way, the pattern is striking. Judgment came as a flood, and only a few were warned in time, wasn't contained to one family. Somehow, that warning rippled far beyond Noah's front yard. Here's where that leaves us. Noah wasn't a lone voice in an empty world. He came from a family that had walked with God for generations. He preached for over a century. He built a warning you could physically watch rise out of the ground. And the corruption around him was obvious enough that Jesus later used it as the ultimate example of people missing what was right in front of them. The warning wasn't hidden. It was everywhere. The only rare thing was someone willing to listen. If this is your kind of deep dive, hit subscribe. Next week we go further back into a story you think you know but don't. Comment below, which detail surprised you most? I read every one. See you next video.